Hello, thank you all for joining us here for Plan, Prepare, Perform, Pre-Arrival in Your Wallet. I'm Bryna Davis, Marketing Coordinator for International Student Loan, and this is Jennifer Frankel, Director of Financial Services. Today we're going to go ahead and cover what you're able to do whenever it comes to funding your international education. Just to go over our agenda, first we're going to cover finding the right school, a few ways that you're able to do that, and then looking at what you're going to need when searching for a school and tools that you can use, as well as scholarships, international student loans, and then in the end we're going to address any questions that you might have, so please feel free to send those in to us whenever you think of any questions. We might not address them right then, but we will towards the end.
So to get started, did you know that there are over 2,000 U.S. colleges and universities across the United States that accept international students? And with so many different options, it's really hard to narrow down which is the right option for you. And the question that's most critical when it comes to financing and being successful at doing that is finding the right school for you. So which one is right for your budget? So I'm going to ask you a question. Here, let me get that up for you. And basically, the question is, what's the most important factor when choosing your school? Is it rankings, reputation, financial aid, total cost, or faculty? So go ahead and fill out that poll. And we'll take a couple more minutes to get more answers in. All right, so I'll give it a couple more seconds. All right, so you can see that there are a lot of different factors that relate to finding the right school. It's financial aid, it's faculty, it's the reputation. So it's important to have the right balance, to know what exactly it is that you're looking for in your school, so that way you can narrow it down to the right one for you. So to give you an idea of what we're looking at here, here is a graph that shows where the primary source of funding is coming for international students. And the majority of international students, about 63%, reported that the majority of their funds come from their own pocket or the help of their own parents. To a lesser extent, second on the list is U.S. college and university support. So that's in the form usually of scholarships and fellowships, which Bryna will cover later on in our presentation. But it's important to know currently where we stand and that the majority of us are paying out of pocket for our own education. That being said, what is happening to tuition? This graph shows you that the red line up top is the exponential growth of what's happening to tuition, and it's increasing and it's outperforming in all the other categories you see here. Now, what does that mean? There's two things that means for you. One is that it means that when you apply, if you haven't already applied to your school, costs may go up for your tuition. The second thing that it means for you is that when you actually apply for school, the first year you may have a certain tuition price, but the second year it may go up. So when you build your budget and you look at your wallet, make sure that you take those factors into consideration. And that leads me to make sure that you budget and that you budget appropriately. So here is a sample budget, and if you want to see it closely, I've put the link on there for you. But basically what it does is it outlines the different budget factors that you need to consider when you put together your expenses that you're going to incur. And it includes everything from transportation to your living expenses to your books and supplies, lab fees. And a lot of times when you actually apply for your school, they're going to give you an overall budget. But keep in mind that those are usually on the lower end of your cost bracket. When some schools have done polls, they found that they get a range of different costs that students incur depending on their lifestyle. So be sure to take that into consideration and to know what exactly it is that you need to cover, and also put in some extra wiggle room in there because you never know what's going to come up. So when it comes to choosing your school, like I said, it is the most important decision that you're going to make in order to be financially successful. And that's because you have costs that go across the board from as little as a couple of $1,000s all the way up to $45,000 or more. So there's certain factors that you can consider that also influence the cost of your cost of living, essentially. So one consideration is rural versus urban. When you go and live in the countryside or in a more rural area, the cost of living is going to be a lot less expensive compared to a big city like New York City, for example, where costs can add up really quickly. You know, taking the metro there, the subway, costs you a few dollars each time each way that you go. The other factor that you'll want to consider is whether you're going to attend a public versus a private institution. Public institutions tend to be less expensive than private, but that's not always the case. So think about it holistically. What you want to do is ask your school what their financial aid package is, because at the end of the day, there are actually private institutions that may be more expensive at the very end of the day, but you might get a very good and appealing financial aid package that may make it even more cost effective than a public school. The next thing to consider is the type of school it is, whether it's a community college or a four-year institution. Many international students who are looking to be budget savvy will actually go to a community college for the first couple of years, and then they'll transfer to a four-year institution, and that'll save them money in the long run, and then they still get the quality degree when they actually graduate. And finally, as I mentioned, you want to look at the full package. You want to think not only how much does your school cost, but also what is the complete package at the end of the day. How much are you going to have to pay for everything? Okay, so next I want to introduce you to Renata and Christian. Renata is an international student as well as Christian, but they've both chosen different paths. Renata's decided to go to the big city. She wants to go to New York City and study at NYU. She realizes that she's going to have to pay more for her expenses, but that's okay because that's what she wants to do, and that's where her college education path is going. On the other hand, Christian, he's a little bit more tight on his budget, and so he's chosen a community college instead. So as you can see from the picture there, he's got his old raggedy car and he's got a bunk bed because he's being a much more thrifty when it comes to evaluating his costs because his pocket isn't as great as Renata's. So what they both did is they figured out their cost. They said, okay, well, I'm going to study at NYU. What are the total costs that I have to pay? And depending on the school that you choose, they may itemize it for you or they may not. So be sure to see if it is one lump amount, what is actually included in there. What Renata and Christian did was they actually broke down the cost. So they broke it down into room and board, to books and to supplies, and other expenses, so that way they were sure how they needed to manage their funds and what they're going to need to pay up front and what they're going to need to expect in the coming year. Now these are actually based on real statistics, and so to further underline and emphasize that point, you see that NYU is about $70,000 with all costs included as compared to the community college, which is only $18,000. So it's important to make sure that you have a good understanding of these. And if you go to a different school, here's a link that you can check out that has all of the schools that accept international students, so that way you can break it down and see what exactly your school costs, so that way you can manage the overall budget. Now, even though you have your budget in place, that doesn't mean that that expense chart is going to stay the same. Things happen, things come up, and so it's important to acknowledge them and to build in a safety net into your actual budget, so that way you can accommodate those unforeseen circumstances. So one example that's happened this year is the exchange rate fluctuations. The Indian students, a lot of them, they were using the rupee, and it has devalued compared to the US dollar. And because of that, even though it's the same price, for them it's a bit more expensive. So always consider those volatility of those exchange rates, and that way you can be better prepared to deal with them. The other thing that can happen is crisis in home. There are some international students where there's a crisis and they can't get the funds out of their home country. So be sure to take extra precautions, see what you can do about bringing extra money or having someone here in the U.S. that can support you financially in case something like that does happen. There's, of course, interruption of funds that can happen, like life-changing events that can create the inability to keep the actual funds that you have because you have to deal with that situation, like having to fly home because of a death or something like that. This happens for some international students. You get to the U.S. and there's a lot to see and a lot to do, and you want to do it all. But make sure that if you do want to take advantage of it, that you spread it out and that you stick to the budget the entire time. And then we're also going to talk about withdrawal of funds from a sponsor, which includes loss of scholarship. So even though you have the money now, doesn't mean that it'll be there for you tomorrow. So talk to your sponsor, see what you need to do, see what the qualifications are in order to maintain a scholarship or sponsorship, so that way you can make sure that you keep in terms with those agreements. And then finally, unexpected costs like accidents and illnesses. Those costs are going to be, they can add up. The U.S. has the most expensive health care in the U.S., and just because you have an insurance plan doesn't mean that it's all covered 100%. So be sure to have an emergency fund built into your budget that will actually take into consideration some of those unforeseen circumstances. And just so everyone knows, we'll make these slides available for you. So if you are looking for those links, we'll make them available for you, so that way you can go back to them and use them later on. So I know we're getting some questions on that, so that'll certainly be addressed, and we'll be able to get that for you as well. If you'd like it emailed to you, you can use the chat function and email us your address, and we'll be happy to send that after our presentation. Okay. Other considerations to consider as you build your budget and to expense in your expense sheet is round trip airfare. So depending on how you book it, you may book one flight to the U.S., but sometimes we forget about the going back part. So if you're not buying a round trip, just make sure that you've got a few hundred or a few thousand, depending on where your home country is, that'll allow you to go back and forth. That also includes trips during spring break or during winter break, that if you want to travel around, that you should also build into your budget. If you're not currently at school and you're actually going to be applying, keep in mind that some schools do require on-site interviews. So it's important to consider your airfare, lodging, and food for that entire period, since most of that will be out of your own pocket. The school typically doesn't cover those expenses. If there's any athletes out there, many of you will arrive early on campus to start training. And if that's the case, you might notice on your campus that some of the actual cafeterias, dormitories aren't open just yet. And so what you may need to do is go off campus or eat at a restaurant, which tend to be more expensive. So be sure to talk to your athletic department and see whether or not those are available and how much you should expect to spend during those weeks or a month before your classes begin. And if you haven't already applied, again, these are all pre-arrival fees that you'll have to consider. There's a CVIS fee, there's a visa application fee. If you do not live near an embassy and you need to commute, you'll be responsible for incurring all of those costs as well. And transportation. Transportation tends to be a major cost for international students, especially those who are living in more of a rural area or a suburb. Where public transportation isn't readily available. So that may require you getting a car and paying the insurance and gas. So look into that, get an idea of what it is that you'll need in order to get from place to place. And also your housing expenses. Are you going to be living in an apartment, or are you going to be living in a dormitory, or are you going to have your own house? What utility expenses are you responsible for? Did you build that into your budget? And then finally, getting settled. When you first arrive, you may have to buy those things that you didn't bring with you if they're a necessity. So be sure to consider that you'll probably spend a few hundred to a few $1,000s when you first get here to get everything up and running. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brianna, who's going to talk to you more about scholarships and what to expect and how to apply.
All right. So after you've established what exactly you need to fund your education, then you need to find a way how to fund your education. So as most of you already know, scholarships are an option. So what exactly is a scholarship? Essentially, it is an award. So you may have an individual or a company who has a sum of money, and they're looking for someone to receive that award. So your job is going to be to find that award and then to apply to it and put forth your 100% effort to get that money to help fund your education. Now, a few different items that they might look for whenever it comes to who they're going to give this award to is going to include income. So they'll be looking at your background, if you're able to afford school on your own or if you need the assistance. They might look at your field of study. So perhaps it's a company who is a research company for a psychology company, then they may be looking for someone who's pursuing psychology. And then your home country, where you're from, you may be able to find awards based upon the country that you're from, as well as scholarships from your home country, which we'll get into a little bit later. And then by destination country, so where you're going. You may have a specific country that is looking for students from other countries and they want to entice international students to come in, so that's one option as well, is looking for those types of scholarships. And then of course you have the school that you'll be attending. Now whenever you look at schools, and this is a great way to determine, as Jennifer has already mentioned, it's a great way to determine what school to choose. You can see what scholarship schools are offering and how it's going to play into your overall ability to pay for your education. Achievement. So obviously they will be looking at how you've performed academically, but often that's not just it. They will also more than likely be looking at how you have interacted with the community, ways that you've helped within your field, different things like that. So it's not just academic, it's also going to be very social as well. So if you're not already doing things like volunteering, then you may want to start. That way you can have an upper hand on that when you apply for scholarships. And then interest level. So you may have an organization that is very focused on music, so they're looking for someone who excels and is very passionate in the music field as well. So it really, make sure that you take note of your passions whenever you do apply for scholarships, and then make sure that you are looking for scholarships that are looking for individuals that have a specific interest. Now, the great thing about scholarships are you typically do not need to repay them. They're a gift to you, as I mentioned before, it's an award. Now, free does not mean easy. So just because it's free money does not mean that it's going to be a simple process and you'll have individuals who are willing to give you funds at the drop of a dime. You're going to have to still work very hard to find the awards and then to also make yourself seem like the best candidate for that award that they're giving away. So where to find scholarships? There's a few different places that you'll need to look. The first one is your institution, so your school. Now sometimes your school may have an automatic scholarship entry whenever you apply to the school, or you may have to submit a separate application. So this is something that you're going to need to contact the admissions office about and see if you're automatically going to be evaluated for those scholarships, or if there's a separate application that you're able to fill out. You can also contact the school advisor that you're working with. They work with a number of other international students, and they have before you've come through. So they know what's available, and they know, what exactly will meet your needs and that you might be eligible for. So make sure that you utilize both of those resources. The Career Center. If you visit the Career Center, you'll find that they have a lot of great connections within the community and with other businesses, throughout the United States or worldwide even. So they will have a lot of great connections whenever it comes to finding awards that you might be eligible for beyond your institution. But once again, it's located at your institution, so it's very readily available for you. And then within your department. Make sure that you go to your department head and see what exactly they have available within your field. So if you're a nursing student or if you're pursuing education, make sure that you go and you see what awards are available within your department. And these really are going to be a really great outlet whenever it comes to the pool table. They're very specialized, so you're not going to be going up against thousands of other international students who are applying for an award like you would for online scholarships. They're going to be very specific and targeted. So your odds of getting those awards are going to be very great. So make sure that you don't overlook those. And then your second option will be the private awards. So you can go to religious and nonprofit organizations, see what they have available. You can also do this locally. So in the town that you'll be studying in, or maybe even your hometown as well, and see what exactly they have available. Because often they will have awards, they're just not really promoted as much, so they may be overlooked, but it's another great outlet. And then your home country. Your home country might be able to grant you a scholarship that it will fund a very good and large portion of your education, such as Brazil, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. Those are all countries that do have these scholarships. So make sure that you look into that and you're not overlooking that outlet. And then of course online. So there's a number of websites that have scholarships available to students. There's also some that target international students specifically. So one thing that you'll want to do is find those sites. That way you can really use your time wisely instead of going to sites that have scholarships for students studying within their home country, that you'll want to make sure you find them for international students. Okay, so first we're going to go ahead and do a poll here. Okay, so the poll will be, I've been trying to get scholarships by emailing people and asking for money, finding scholarships I'm eligible for and completing the application, looking for schools that mention they have a scholarship for international students, or I don't even know where to start. So I'll give you about 30 seconds here. Okay. Great, so it looks like most of you are looking for schools that mention they have scholarships for international students. That's a really great place to start. Okay, so how do I get a scholarship? The biggest question of all. So, first of all, as I mentioned, you're gonna wanna find a good scholarship site that really targets international students. Because as you've seen, there's a number of scholarships out there, but it takes time to sift through them all. So you can cut out hundreds of thousands of scholarships and time wasted right away by finding sites that target international students. So a few good sites to go to are IEFA.org, internationalscholarships.com, and fundingusstudy.org. Now, the great thing about these is you're able to narrow down your search even further by what you're studying, where you're from, and where you're going. So it can get very targeted, and instead of wasting time, just going to Google and trying to find international scholarships, you can really narrow it down and use your time wisely to get the funds that you need. So after you've gone to these websites and you find a scholarship that you're interested in, it looks like it's going to be a good amount to cover what you're needing, you need to check the award eligibility. Once again, they're not going to just have a requirement that you are an international student. More than likely, it's going to ask that you are either from a certain country, or you're going to a certain country, or you're pursuing a specific field of study. So you'll really want to make sure that you find an award that you're eligible for, because you don't want to waste your time trying to get these funds whenever you don't even meet the eligibility requirements. So a few items that you will need whenever you apply are more than likely going to be the following, and that's going to be transcripts. So it's going to be your grade average, how you performed at your previous school. I know most of you are going to be entering college for the first time, so they'll want to see how you performed in high school and what you've been doing. Letters of recommendation. Typically you only need about one or two. But it's very important that you not just get a letter of recommendation through the door, that you find the perfect person to write this letter of recommendation for you. So for example, if it's a scholarship that wants to see, or that's going to be based upon your field, maybe once again it's within the nursing industry, you're going to want to find someone that you have been working with closely in that field. So maybe if you've done some volunteer work at a hospital, you're going to want to find someone that you've worked with there to write that letter of recommendation. So it's really going to be about the quality of the recommendation letter, but also who's writing it. And then an essay. So this is also where a lot of the work on your end comes through. Don't just get an essay through the door. You're going to want to really focus on making it the best that it can be. And we're going to show you a little bit, a few tips that you can use whenever it comes to writing an essay, because it's going to, once again, with the letter of recommendation, it's going to be a very key part of who gets that money. And then the deadline. Make sure that you check the deadline and that you're not missing it, and that you know when it's due. That way you don't send it in a day late and you've done all of that work for nothing. Okay, so a few tips for writing your essay. Number one, do not procrastinate. Make sure that you're doing your search for scholarships early and you know which ones need essays. So don't wait till the night before to write it. You'll want to make sure that you are able to do a first draft, a second draft, really go through and make it the best that it can be. You're not going to be able to have someone proofread it for you if you're doing it an hour before it's due. So don't procrastinate. Make sure that you have someone proofread it. This is especially important if English is not your second language and you're applying for a scholarship that has to be submitted in English, or if you're applying for a scholarship that's in another language that is your second language. You're going to want to have someone proofread it. That way it's going to be grammatically correct and it's going to be nice and clean whenever it's submitted. Be creative. Don't just spout out why you need the money and why you would like to study at your host school and your host country. Really be creative and find a way to stand out from the crowd. Just sit there and brainstorm and really try to find different ways that other students might not be thinking of and really go with that. And whenever it comes to being creative, something that you'll want to do beforehand is get to know your audience. So know what it is that they're looking for, and then really try to target that whenever you're brainstorming and thinking of ways to be creative. And show growth. So lastly, whenever you are writing an essay, you're going to want to tell it like a story. So you'll want to start off with, in the beginning, this is a hurdle I had to overcome. You'll want to tell the story of how it unravels, and then in the end, what was the end product? How did you grow from that experience? Okay, so you will have a number of scholarships, hopefully, that you're applying for. Because as we all know, we don't always get the one scholarship that we apply for that will cover the entire tuition. It's always helpful to apply to a few scholarships, even if they're smaller ones. It's all going to help fund your entire education. So what you'll need to do is stay organized and stay dedicated. A good way to do this is keep a calendar. On that calendar, you're going to want to list out the deadline of the award, the documents that are needed for that award, and then the application address or email address. So know beforehand where it needs to go to. You don't want to gather up all of the documents and just to have to go back and see where you need to send it into and realize that you can't find the address and then miss the deadline. So make sure you know where it needs to go after you have everything and it's ready to go. And then take note of the announcement date. When will they be announcing the winner of the award? You could be the winner and they could be trying to send you emails that are getting filtered into your spam box, or perhaps they're not able to reach you at the phone number that you gave them. Make sure you know what that announcement date is. That way you can follow up with them if you have not heard back. That way if you are the winner and they can't get a hold of you, you'll be able to have a way to find out. Okay, we are going to do one more poll for scholarships. All right, and that is the biggest problem I've had when it comes to getting scholarships is finding a scholarship to apply for, gathering the documents needed to apply, meeting the deadline, or I didn't know scholarships were an option. Okay, wow, that's pretty overwhelming, finding a scholarship to apply for. Okay, so after you have come up with your budget and found out what you're going to need to fund your studies, and after you've used your personal funds, and after you have looked and utilized all of the scholarships possible, you might still need a little bit more financial help. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to Jennifer, and she's going to let you know what you can do from there.
Okay, so when it comes to funding your education, scholarships are definitely the place to go first, because with scholarships, you basically have the money and you don't have to repay it. It's basically what I call free aid or gift aid. So that's what you want to maximize. But in some cases, you might find that you're coming shy of the number that you need to cover. And in that case, international student loan can be a great option for you. So what's different about a loan compared to a scholarship is that it's money that you're going to actually borrow. You're going to pay it back at the end, plus you're going to pay back interest. And what interest is, it's an additional amount that you're going to pay for the cost of borrowing that money. So recognize that it's not going to be free, and it is one of those financial tools that you can use, but you will have to pay back and will have some sort of cost to you. But the good news is that you can use it to help cover your education, and that international students are eligible for it. So with that, I want to do a poll as well. And our poll on this one, give me a second, I'll pull that up. And the question is, have you applied for a student loan before? So has anyone had experience with loans? Yeah, this tends to be more of a tricky one that I think most international students don't know about. And so because of that, we're going to go into a little bit more in depth and see what we have there. So it looks like actually overwhelming 100% of you have not applied for an international student loan. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the process and introduce this concept. Okay, so international student loans, what do they cover? They cover up to the total cost of your education, minus any other financial aid that you've received. So if you've had scholarships, for example, that would be deducted from the total amount that you can apply for. And it's all education-related expenses, which include tuition, books, health insurance, transportation, room and board. These are all expenses that you can get covered by your international student loan. And to talk more about the process, the first part is finding a U.S. cosigner. The next is choosing your loan and then applying for the loan. So to go into a little bit more in depth about it, the first part is to find a U.S. cosigner. Now your U.S. cosigner has to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, having lived in the U.S. for the last 2 years and having good credit. So unfortunately, it can't be a parent back home in your home country. It can't be a friend back home either. They have to meet those 3 criteria in order to be eligible. So again, that's U.S. citizen or permanent resident. In other words, having a green card, that they've been in the U.S. for the last 2 years and they have good credit. And you're probably sitting there asking yourself, why? Well, basically, these loans do not have any collateral attached to them. So it's not like you're giving up your car or your house or something like that in case you cannot pay. So because of that, these lenders want to have someone in the U.S. that would be responsible in case you default on the loan. So the first part is to find a U.S. cosigner. You can ask your parents, you can ask relatives if they have relatives, let's say, or someone else that they know that's in the U.S., then that would be a good place to start. The next part of finding a loan and to apply for it before you do any of the work is to figure out whether or not you're eligible. Some of the loans may be really easy to go through and apply. You spend 20 minutes doing it, and at the very end you find that you're not eligible. So make sure that you do that consideration in the beginning. So first you're going to see if it works for your school. The lender will work on the back end with your school to make sure that you're eligible, to make sure that that's all of the aid that you can apply for. So they'll be contacting them, so it's important, one, to check to see whether your school is eligible. The next step is a Social Security number. This is not a requirement for loans, although some of them do require it. So if you do not have a Social Security number, what you can do is see what loans you're eligible for, and then verify whether or not they require you to have a Social Security number. In some cases, you might have to fill out a paper application instead. So just make sure that you give them a call to find out what the process is like. And the next is to make sure that they will lend to international students. So not all lenders work with all international students, unfortunately, but there are a bunch that do. So what we've done at internationalstudentloan.com is we've created a comparison tool that allows you to choose your school and your citizenship and then be matched with different loans that work for your school. And that also have already been vetted to work with international students. So that's a great place that you can fill it out in 2 seconds. You can get a list of the lenders that work for you. You can compare terms and conditions and then choose the one that works right for you. And really what it comes down to is reviewing and understanding the terms to make sure that you're familiar with what you're agreeing to and when you need to start paying back your loan, so that way you can make sure that you have the proper cash flow. Before even applying for a student loan, what you want to do is make sure that you have all of this information. So you want to make sure you have your Social Security number, if that's applicable, your driver's license, and then your college information. You're going to want to know what the total cost of attendance is, and also how much you actually want to borrow. And like I said, you can borrow up to the total cost of your education. If you are employed, let's say you're on OPT or CPT, which are eligible to, as an international student, to work, then you want to have that information as well. And then your co-signer will have to fill out some documentation as well, so you'll need to have their email address. And finally, some lenders may also ask for a reference contact information. So make sure you have all of that handy before you start filling out the forms, so that way it'll make the process faster for you. So once you've done all that, you've filled out the application, you've submitted it, then many of them will allow you to be pre-qualified within minutes. So you'll know whether or not you'll be pre-qualified, and then you'll get notice from them officially that you've been approved for the loan or that you haven't. If you haven't, chances are that's related to your cosigner, so you can always reapply with a different cosigner. And the other thing is that you can apply for these loans whenever you'd like. So there's no official time period where you would have to fill out the application. It's year-round. Once you have been approved, you'll get additional documents that you'll need to sign, so make sure that you read through and understand that. And then finally, you'll get approved. Once you get approved on the back end, so you won't even know that this is happening, but the lender will contact your school to make sure, one, that you're studying at that school and that you're actually eligible, and two, that the amount that you're asking to borrow has been certified by the school as a total cost of lending. So you're not able to borrow any more than what your school certifies. Once that's been settled, then the money from the lender will be sent to the school, and then the school will then disperse the money to you. And by disperse, I mean they'll give the money, usually the school will give it to you by check, but check with your financial aid department if you have one, or your international student advisor, to see where you need to go in order to verify how the money is dispersed and when. When it comes to loans, there's a lot of terminology, and so it can be very complicated. So here are just 3 of the most important terms that I recommend understanding. One is repayment. Repayment is the process in which you're paying back a loan to the lender. So this is usually done in certain increments, meaning you could do it starting when you're in school. You'll pay the interest back plus the principal. There's different ways that you can do it. You could also defer the payment. So if you don't think that you can pay right when you start your school, you can actually say that you don't want to pay it until after you complete and graduate. But make sure that you check those terms, because in those terms it'll say what they expect and when they expect to get paid. The other is disbursement, which we did cover, and that's basically the money that the school is giving to you that you're able to then use. And then finally is the interest rate. And the interest rate is the amount of money that they charge you so that you can borrow money. And the interest rate basically is variable. So they'll give you an approximate interest rate when you first apply, but you won't get the true interest rate until after you get approved. And the reason for that is, one is your co-signer, again, their credit worthiness will depend on what the interest rate will be. So the better your co-signer in terms of good credit, the lower your interest rate will be. Secondly, the amount of time that you have the loan and how long you defer it. So if you are going to do payments over 5 years versus 2 years, the 5-year loan will be more expensive than the 2-year because of the risk associated with that. And then finally, also the amount of payments that you make when those start. So if you start paying right away, your interest rate will be lower than if you wait until after you graduate and then start paying it back. So be sure that you're familiar with it. If you have any questions, our contact information will be at the end of this slide, so that way you can email us with any questions you have on terminology. You can also check out internationalstudentloan.com and go to the resources section, and there you can find a ton of information that can help you understand the loan process better. Now I'm going to turn it over to Brianna for some of the questions that you've been sending in, and we'll go over some more information in detail.
Okay, so we have had a few questions come in, but if you have not had a chance to send in your question, please do so now. You can spend a couple of seconds here brainstorming and really think about any last questions that you have, and then we'll go ahead and dive right into those.
And just so that everyone knows, if you do want a copy of the presentation with the links, I know we're getting questions on getting those URLs. We will send out the PowerPoint if you'd like it. Just make sure that in the chat function you put your email address, and we'll be happy to get that out to you.
Okay. Yes, so we have one question asking if we are their current institution. So we actually are not a college or university. However, as we've gone through, we are here to help you find resources whenever it comes to finding scholarships or loans for your university. So while we're not a school, once again, you know, if you have specific questions to finding a scholarship for your school or finding an international student loan, please send that in and we can help you further directly with that. Okay, so we have a question, where can we find a loan? So once again, as Jennifer mentioned, you're going to have to find a lender that will work with international students as well as your school. Now, one great place to do that is going to be internationalstudentloan.com, because there you can see the link right there at the bottom of the page. At that site, then you can go ahead and use the easy comparison tool, and that's going to filter through what lenders are available for you, an international student at your school. So instead of having to do the research and work to find a lender, you can have it right there at your fingertips. Okay, so we do have another question. Are there any public universities that you recommend? And really what that's going to come down to is what you're interested in and what funding, what your budget is. So it's really going to be a question that you know, it's personalized from person to person. One great area that, or one great site that you're able to go to is internationalstudent.com. They have a school search there, and you're able to filter by your degree that you're pursuing, as well as what state you would like to be in. You can go and see what the tuition costs for schools are, as well as what degree programs they have and where it's located. There'll also be contact information for that school. So once again, that's www.internationalstudent.com. And then at the top, you'll be able to find the school search there. So that's a really great resource if you're looking for a school to attend. Let's see, okay, so we have a question, let's see, where can I find a cosigner? My mom lives in the US and she says that she's able to be my cosigner. Is this true? It's going to depend. If your mom is a US citizen or permanent resident who has lived inside the US for the past 2 years, and she's approved for her credit, then she would be able to be your cosigner. But she does have to meet those requirements. Okay, what is a cosigner? So going back to what is a cosigner is that's the individual who would help you to receive a loan. So they're going to be joining the loan application with you since you are not going to be able to have the built up credit in order to receive the loan. So they're going to help you during that loan application process. And once again, this is recorded. You're going to have access to this right online so you can watch it again. If you would like us to email it to you, we're more than happy to do so. Please send us in your email address and we're more than happy to send it in to you. Okay, we have a few more questions coming through. Make sure you get those in as soon as possible if you do have any that you have not yet asked. So one question is, what if I don't have any personal funds for my tuition? Once again, that's a common problem. That's part of the reason why we're here to let you know about scholarships and about loans. There's many individuals who do not have personal funds to fund their aid. So the first step is look for scholarships. Look for scholarships that are both private and that are offered at the schools that you're looking to attend and see what they have that's available. After you've utilized all of the scholarships available to you, then you'll want to look at loans, international student loans, and fill any gaps that you might have from there. Okay, are there any other questions that are coming in? Okay, we do have, are there any grants available for international students? There are a number of grants available for international students. Once again, using the term grants, scholarships, awards, those can all be along the same lines. Typically, grants are going to be to institutions. So a better word that you might want to use when trying to find aid is scholarships. And once again, you can find this at www.iefa.org. And then we had a couple of other websites on there as well that whenever we send you this presentation, you'll have access to. And we can go ahead and answer a few more questions here. Okay, is there a website for international scholarships? So once again, www.iefa.org, as well as www.internationalscholarships.com, and then we have www.fundingusstudy.org. We have the slide up right now if you'd like. You can jot those down. If you have not sent us your email address to send you the presentation, you can visit those sites. Okay, so you're asking questions about merit scholarships, and we have a question here. It says you have a 3.98 GPA out of 4. That's a great GPA. Unfortunately, we're not able to say that this specific GPA will get you an award or not, because it's really going to be based upon who is granting that award and what they deem as, the best possible individual to receive that. So it's really going to depend on what award you're applying to and what rules and regulations they have laid out. But that's a very great GPA, so I think that's that's very strong. And what you might want to focus on along with that now is getting your essay perfected, getting those great letters of recommendation, and then really having those to accent your great academic achievements. Okay, it looks like those are all of the questions that we have for today. If you have any others, we'll give you a couple more seconds here to send those in. And once again, if you like this, please don't forget to send in your email address so we can get it to you.
And to build on what Brianna was talking about, basically what you want to do, if you don't need financial aid out of need, but you're looking at merit, make sure that if you go to, let's say, your career center or you talk to your advisor, let them know that you're not qualified for that. It's very hard to find those diversity awards, but those are out there too. A lot of schools are making a push to kind of diversify their student body as well. So look at your own personal applications, see what makes you stand out, and then do some research on these websites and talk to people. Even your alumni association at your school might be able to help find some specific awards that you may be eligible for, because some of them are kind of going away from the GPA based only need, and they're going to want to see some other things that make you stand out, like if you do some sort of skill or you have some sort of diversity award.
Okay, we have a question asking where to send your email address in to receive the presentation. You can just send it right on through that question chat. Okay, we have another question. What options are available to international students in terms of funding besides scholarships? Once again, after you've looked at scholarship options, then you're going to want to look at loans if you still need funding for your education. So personal funds is the first step, scholarships is the second, international student loans is the third. Okay. All right, and it looks like those might be all of our questions. So we just want to thank you for joining us today. Hopefully you were able to benefit from the information that we were able to provide for you. One last time, if you have not sent in your email address to the questions chat box, please make sure you do so and we'll get you the presentation, and then we can also help with any other questions that you might have offline.
Thank you all for coming. We hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you have any further questions, our email address is right on that slide, info@internationalstudentloan.com. Feel free to send your questions as they come up. We're happy to help. And thank you all for coming today.